Hey, my tech friends, thanks for stopping by. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. Let's continue to grow this channel. Hope you guys enjoy this video.
Hey guys, welcome to another video. In today's video, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at this X-Lite system again. It's our X-Lite Windows 10 system. We had secured this system in a previous video. I'll put the link in the description, but I figured what we'd do today is we'd install some software on this thing and test drive it. See how it actually functions once we have all of our configuration on it, our antivirus on it, our browsers on it, an Office application on it, Steam on it, the Epic game platform on it, and all of the updates on it to support those additional packages and configurations, and then see how we are from a size perspective, a security perspective, whether or not we lost anything, how big the operating system is at that point, and we will figure out if this is a usable operating system once we have the security in place and all the software in place. Stick around. Okay, so what we've done at this point, we've got all the applications downloaded to this machine. Specifically, we're going to install Firefox, we're going to get Steam installed, FreeOffice, the Epic installer, and then I figured we'd go an extra step and install the Adobe Reader because somebody's going to likely want to put PDF readers on the systems. I would always suggest using the Foxit Reader over the Adobe Reader, but the Foxit Reader, for whatever reason, has a problem with downloading on a Linux-based system for Windows-based use. Or the downloader is located in one of the geolocations that I'm fenced off on my firewall on, so I just don't have access to it to download it. But it is the product that I would say is better, as well as Kofax. So if you ever need to use a PDF editor like a full suite product, check out Kofax versus the Adobe Pro. Again, I have no sponsors, so this is just from personal experience. These particular applications have a tendency to be not only much cheaper than the Adobe product, but work better in a corporate environment. So I would, again, check out Kofax. That's one of the companies that makes a PDF editor software for Microsoft Windows. That's hands down one of the best ones out there and way, way, way cheaper than the Adobe Pro version. Also, it's software-based, so you don't have to deal with that whole cloud-based license garbage that Adobe's doing. So, yeah, I would definitely check that out. But that said, I guess for just the ease of installing it on this particular machine, I'm going to use the Adobe Reader. Even though, again, I would suggest against it, mostly because even from a security perspective, Adobe Reader has had more bugs and problems in it over the years than any other one that exists on the planet. So, and their support is just, if you ever need support for a product that you purchase through them, which all their products are extremely expensive, so you would expect to have good support, you don't. The support team is usually terrible. And when you do get escalated to somebody that does know something, you're so frustrated with the product at that point, and you've wasted so much of your day and time dealing with it, you'd be better off going with any of the other ones. Again, like there's I think the one's called Phantom PDF, which is part of the Foxit PDF Pro Reader configuration. That's okay, but again, the Kofax one is probably the best one out there, and they do have really good support, and they're a lot cheaper than the Adobe products. So check them out if you do need an Adobe full editor program for Windows in an enterprise type of scenario. With that said, let's get the rest of the software installed on this system. Let's throw it on the internet and let's start to test it out. So I figured before we do that, I should at least go into the File Explorer here and we can take a look. So we're at 13 gigs free of 20 gigs. So really about 14 gigs free of 20 gigs. So we're right around the 6.1 gigs of used space at this point, used storage, 6.1 gigs. So we're just going to call it 6 gigs of used storage. And let's get some stuff installed on this thing. Obviously, we're going to reduce the storage size by just installing the applications. But once we get the applications installed, we're going to run the rest of the Windows updates on this system, reboot the box. And once the box comes back up, we'll do a little test drive. We'll take a look at it. We'll run our nessus scan. We'll see what we get. All right, so first thing we're going to install is Firefox. Okay, so Firefox is installing. We'll get that up the rest of the way. We'll make sure that the internet functions, at least get into like youtube.com, and then we will kick off the next installer. Okay, so our YouTube function works fine with our configurations on our setup, so we should be good to go on YouTube. Okay, moving on, we're going to get FreeOffice installed, so we'll just install FreeOffice. Again, these guys aren't sponsored, but if you're looking for a product that's similar to your Microsoft Office products for a fraction of the cost in your business. Free Office is good. If you're at home and you want to use the Office product, the license is set up that you could use it at home for free. You do have to register. They will send you a serial key to use it. I think you get a 7-day or a 7-use trial key out of the box. But once you register for it, they will send you a key. And it is a really good alternative to Microsoft Office. It gives you the ability to use the same type of ribbon system. It's really designed and laid out pretty much identical. And there's really not much of a learning step or transition between using this and, say, using your Microsoft Office product. Okay, so our Office application now is installed, our free Office application. So we're just going to open it up so you can take a look at it and see specifically what I'm talking about from the menu system. So prefer the darker version. Obviously, you could choose what you want. You could do the touch version, which, so if you're on like a Microsoft Surface, it gives you the larger icons so you could touch them. It makes it easier for that to be selected. You just click on OK and it'll open up the product. Okay, so we have our Office application installed. We have our browser installed and both work. Let's go now and install Steam. Okay, so Steam is installed. It appears to be running fine. We don't have any issues with it running. We can take a look at the task manager and see it's loaded. So that's good news. So let's now go and get the Epic installer installed and see if we get the same result. So I'm just going to right click on it and do install. And then install, and it's going to prompt us hopefully with the UAC. There we go. Prompts again to install the Epic Online Services. So we'll click yes. Continue on that process. Okay, so our installer finished. It is running. Again, we could check our task manager to see what that looks like with the Epic Game Installer Launcher running. So that's on. All right, so let's get Adobe installed. Okay, so what we're going to do is just right-click on it, choose Run as Administrator. Say yes. Okay, so we're prompted with location and making the Adobe Acrobat Reader our default PDF application, so we'll just click Install. So I want to point out that when you go to their website and you download the Adobe Acrobat Reader application, there's a little bar at the bottom of the website that indicates that the application is downloading. That bar doesn't equate to the actual application. So in other words, the bar finishes well before the application starts to install, even though if you do the run command from the actual browser to run it. So there's a false representation as to the speed of the download as well as the size of the application. Because even from here, we see that it's 294 megs in size, but that's not the full application. That's just a portion of it to install the full application. The full application is far bigger than the 294 megs. So the other thing is that I figured you guys would ask is how big is it? And it's specifically the size on disk is 878 megs. And that's just for the Adobe Reader. The Adobe Reader is almost a gig in size, which is enormous for an application just to read something. I mean, if you want a comparable as to seeing how big that is, then let's look at the SoftMaker Free Office, right? So this is the Office application that has the Word application, the Excel application, and basically like a PowerPoint type of application built into it. That entire application is 208 megs. So it's 3 applications for 208 megs versus Adobe Reader, which is nearly a gig at this point, which is 878 megs in size, which is enormous. That's why I think this application's crap. It's just they've kept building on and building on and building on and building on versus re-engineering it and actually cleaning it up, fixing it, making it small, lightweight, and functional. It's been around forever, but it's really, I mean, by today's standards, there's so many different ones out there that are so much better than this thing that I don't know. It's only installed on this machine for the sake of testing and because it was easy to download as a standalone installer to get the installation to run from Linux. If not, it wouldn't exist on this machine. And it's one of those types of things that, if somebody's been around for a while and they've used it over and over and over again for an ease of use type of configuration, then yeah, we can install it. But if it's somebody that's, fresh out of college, that's just getting into working on computers in an office scenario, I would avoid this thing like the plague because it's slow, it's clunky, the support's garbage, and it's enormous. It's just not a very good or well-developed application. It's still relatively the same code that it's been since the 90s, and they just keep adding to it, and they never cleaned it up. It's a failing configuration. They should have redeveloped it and redesigned it so that way it was small, lightweight, and likely portable. So that way it would combat the issues that it has and all the security failures and flaws that it has. It's just not a very good application. But it's also nice to put it on a system that we're going to do security testing on because, if there's something or not patched, it would show up. So with that said, the other thing we're going to notice here is that this particular Adobe application is in our x86 directory versus our 64-bit version. And the reason why is because if you run a Microsoft Office product and you like to use the Explorer option to view documentation inside of your Explorer window, if you don't use the 32-bit version, it has an issue with your Microsoft Office version and it will not work correctly. So if your Adobe application is 64-bit, your Office application is 32-bit, and the Office apps like the .doc or docx files were created in a 32-bit version of Office, then the Explorer preview window will fail to load. But if you use a 32-bit version of Adobe Reader, a 32-bit version of Office, and there's a 32-bit file, works fine. If it's a 32-bit version of Office and a 32-bit version of Adobe Reader and a 64-bit Office version of the DOC or DOCX file, it still works fine. But if it's the flip side and it's a 64-bit version of the Adobe Reader and a 64-bit version of Office and either a 64-bit or a 32-bit version of the Office document itself, it will fail in the preview because Explorer itself was never redesigned and only will preview on a 32-bit application. So it's something to keep in mind if you use the preview function for documents, is that you need the 32-bit version of Office and the 32-bit version of Adobe Reader to preview the documentation. If not, it will fail. Okay, so the last thing I want to get installed on this thing, since we've done the Epic installer, we've done Firefox, we've done FreeOffice, we've done Steam, is to install the Notepad++ application. So this particular system came with our built-in version of Notepad, so that's plus. But with that said, I still would prefer to use Notepad++ because there's size limitations in the original version of the Notepad documentation reader on Windows. And if you try to go too big, it just craps out and crashes, whereas Notepad++ will open the documentation. It's also, in my opinion, a much cleaner and easier to use piece of application for the sake of reading documentation on Windows. So, all right, so we have our application stack installed now on our X-Lite Windows 10 system. So let's reboot this thing and take a look to see if everything works. Okay, so everything works, or at least it appears to work. We got the granted the Steam notification on boot. That's the first thing I'm going to do is go into Task Manager, go to Startup, locate Steam, and disable this from Startup. Also make sure my OneDrive is disabled. I'm also going to disable the Epic Game Launcher at startup and Adobe Reader at startup. When you disable applications at startup, they don't start with Windows. But that doesn't mean you can't double-click on the icon to start the application. So all you're doing is you're reducing the amount of time it takes to load the operating system when you disable those applications. Now, there are some applications that you do want to start with Windows, like your security applications, like anything that's an antivirus, you want that to start with Windows, because it's going to scan the system as things are loading in the system. That's important. But things like Steam or your game launcher or Adobe, they don't need to start with Windows. They could start after Windows is up and only if you double click on them. Because if not, you got all these applications and all this crap running in the background, which will lower your performance of your system. So no matter how much fat you trim out of the OS, if you install applications and you keep that crap running when the system actually boots, all you're doing is you're adding back to the OS where you already subtracted things. So it's just gonna even out. You're gonna lose the performance of the system. There's really no reason to do that. Now, the reason the applications themselves launch usually is so that way on startup, the system will run the application to check for Windows updates and updates for the application. So sometimes the applications have a built-in stub where they'll check the Windows update location for like updated drivers. Some of them don't. Some of them will just check their manufacturer's website for updates. And what they'll do is they'll run the updates on the applications while the system is loading. So that way, once it's loaded, if you wanted to run the application, it's instantaneous. But if you don't care about that and you want the performance of the system because maybe you want to use Steam instead of Epic or maybe you want to use Epic instead of Steam, then you should have those things disabled. And then you should just double click on the launcher so that way it'll launch, it'll run the update, and you can launch it and run it that way. That way you're not chewing bandwidth, you're not chewing system resources to run applications that you're not going to use that day. Okay, so now that we have things stopped for our startup, we already know that everything works. I mean, we've been in here, we've checked, with the exception of, I think, Notepad++, but if we really need to, we could go in here and just run that. Yeah, let's download the latest version. So we'll run our updates on stuff. Great. All right, so we updated the Notepad++ application. All the other stuff works. We've run everything that's been on this system so far. Yeah, I don't care. I'm declining. I could quit. That's fine. So everything is up and running. With that said, let's now jump into our Windows updates and see if there's any updates available for the system, so we could patch the system. I figure the first thing we'll do here is we'll try to fix it by using our Windows Update Enable tool. So let's run that. Oh, that didn't work. So we still have something broken in Windows Updates. Let's see if we could fix that. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to attempt to fix this Windows Update issue with a script that we had wrote previously in a different video. And specifically what this script does is it's a reset script that resets basically all of your Windows configuration for like your Internet Explorer config. So if you have group policy for Internet Explorer, this will revert it all. It will delete and reconfigure all of your Windows Update configuration. It will restart all your settings. It'll do the same thing for Chrome, so it clears all the tracking information out of Chrome, deletes all the unique identifiers out of Chrome, and then clears all the Chrome temporary files. Also does the same thing for Microsoft Edge. I don't have the Edge crap in this one. I actually deleted it out because this operating system does not have Microsoft Edge installed. So with that said, it does a pretty good job cleaning stuff up so that way we could attempt to fix the issues. Something to keep in mind though is for the rest of you guys that are like me that run Linux as your primary operating system, when you create these things, even if you don't have word wrap turned on, if you guys are running the original like out-of-the-box text editor from like Ubuntu or Linux, it will auto word wrap these areas here inside of the configuration, and when it does that and you try to launch the actual script in Windows, it will fail. So make sure that you open any scripts that you have configured on a Linux side in Windows to confirm that the word wrap hasn't wrapped the actual text, because if not, the script just won't complete successful. And that's just something to keep in mind if you don't already know. If I'm just saying something and preaching to the choir, then somebody out there is bound not to know that. So there you go. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to launch that script with a command line. So we're just going to go into CMD and run as admin. And then we'll change directory to this location. Fix home. Okay. So we're going to run this, and the system's going to force a reboot after it completes. I would say just the other thing to keep in mind is if you're interested in the script, you want it, just let me know in the comments, and I'll throw it down inside of our Git, and you guys could grab it from the repository. Okay, so the first thing we're going to get here is the reset of Internet Explorer. And it's going to reset the an additional portion of Internet Explorer. So it does it based off of every profile that it sees on the system. So if it has multiple profiles on one desktop, it'll delete it out of all that stuff. Now, the only thing to keep in mind is when it deletes it, it's deleting your temporary, your favorites too. So make sure that you take a backup of your favorites or your bookmarks before you run the script. Okay, guys, so the system is now back up. Let's see if we can run updates on it now. Just gonna click on retry. Nope, still got the same error. So we have our configuration reset. We have our services started that are required for it. We have the firewall rules set to enable Windows updates through the firewall. Let's see if maybe if we turn off the firewall, if we have any difference. So we'll just open up command prompt again. I wonder if I could grab and drag this to the desktop. No, of course not. But you know what we can do is we can go to Windows System 32, CMD, create a shortcut. That'll work. Okay, so our Windows firewall's turned off. Let's try it now. Nope, still the same error. So we don't have an issue with the firewall per se blocking the actual ports. Let's see if we could figure out what else could possibly cause this. All right, so let's run a check to see if the services are actually running that are required to run Windows updates. And since I want to do this, I want to actually see specifically what they're going to do. We're going to get the output on here. If we have to, we could always pipe this over to a text document. But for the sake of this, let's just run it from here and see if it makes any difference whatsoever. So we'll go to tools, scripts. That's interesting. So we're missing three services that are required for Windows updates to function at all. So let's see if now we can run the update since we have these three services started that were not previously started. Let's see if there's any difference at all. No, we still get a failure. So we do have, it looks like, at least a couple configuration services that are not present in the operating system, which is slightly a concern since they are technically required for Windows updates to work. All right, so if Windows updates are borked on this actual operating system to run any updates of any kind, let's see if maybe we could use the WSUS offline installer to force the Windows updates to the configuration tool. Okay, so it appears that at least WSUS offline, the community edition, still supports 22H2, so I'm right now rolling the updates up on this particular system to the latest version of updates with the WSUS offline installer, because the online installer, at least on this particular Windows 10 machine, is broken to the point of no return. I think at this point I would actually have to do an in-place repair on the operating system to actually fix the missing portions of the OS, which would be required in order for us to run Windows updates. Okay guys, so fast forward to the next day. I ended up screwing around with the system last night, trying to get this Windows Update thing to work. And as we can see here, we still are in a position where it doesn't work. However, I rewrote some of the scripting that I did for our Windows Update configuration. Basically, grabbed the original update block configuration that we found in the X-Lite system, or Ghost, I can't remember specifically where it was. And I modified and tweaked the package that was in that configuration to reattempt to import the registry configuration back, as well as to fix the service structure for the start and stop of the services for Windows updates themselves to actually run. So now I think since I've done that, I think I have this resolved. So let's actually run this as admin for the Windows Update enable, and let's give it a shot to see if this now works. Oh, still have the same issue. You know what? Let's reboot this system and see if when it comes back up, it fixes it, because we are adding registry keys back to the system that were missing in this operating system. Okay, so that didn't fix it. So what I'm going to do now is, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this reg key fix that I just modified. So I had a registry key updater created for this machine, but it looks like I'm missing at least 2 keys. So let's run this one on this machine now to merge the configuration. Yes, great. And let's reboot it again, and let's try it one more time. Okay, so the system just came back up. Let's go into services, or rather settings. Let's go to update and security. Now let's check to see if we can get updates. Sweet. So that fixes the updates on our X-Lite system. So now let's finish out the update on this particular system and see what we get from an operating system size perspective. So that way you get a better idea as to how big this OS actually is with all updates applied. Okay, so I think it's fair to say that I'm not going to have enough space to install the updates available for the system, which tells me that the security of this system likely hasn't been patched. Now, I realize that we do have the option or the ability to patch systems manually by creating registry changes and fixes to the OS platform ourselves without having to use the Windows Update process to do it, to actually harden the security and lock the system down. But on this particular system, it doesn't have that. So I have to rely on something to secure the actual operating system. And since I'm not going to spend the amount of time that it would be required to lock down somebody else's project, I would say that updates are the only choice. So really, the X-Lite system isn't light. The Windows 10 version of the X-Lite system, all things considered, just to run the operating system, is going to easily run you 20 to 25 gigs in size. There's no way around that. That's what you're going to need in order to run the operating system, with security intact, and all the changes that we already made to the system to attempt to secure the system. Considering that as a scenario that you would have to do in order to actually lock down the system, I really still think that you would be better off running the vanilla version of Windows 10. With that said, I mean, we've looked at a variety of Windows 10 systems, and if you want to run something that's secure, that's a Windows 10 system, then the older version, the COVID-released version of the 20H2 Windows 10 Ghost Edition is still the only one out of all the ones we've tested and all the different variables and the release and the builds and the numbers, that's the only one that has any form of security whatsoever in the operating system. So since we're running out of drive space on this system and I don't want the system to fill to the point of no return, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go back into my fixes and I'm going to run this disable. So that crash tells me likely that this stopped running its update. Yeah, something went wrong. Great, that's perfect. So that killed our updates, which is fine because at this point, if I continue the update process, I'm going to run out of drive space on the system, and there's no point in me expanding it any further. I already know that the operating system is flawed. There's really no reason to continue on with this particular OS. Okay, so where does this leave us? In reality, it leaves us exactly where we would be in a Windows 10 Vanilla Edition.
It could work as a daily driver, but you're going to have to put a lot of effort into it to make it secure and make it function as a daily driver. Stuff that already exists in your vanilla version of Windows 10. It doesn't offer any additional security functions to it. The things that are stripped out of it weren't stripped out correctly, so you still have Swiss cheesed versions of your firewall configuration, which means that, there's no security. You remove the back end, but you still have the doors open to allow intruders into your system. It will run applications. You can install applications on it. And then when you go to run your updates, you're going to end up with an operating system that's just as big as if you started off with a Windows 10 vanilla system to begin with. There's no performance benefit of this particular system. I mean, from a size perspective, yes. On the initial install, it's small. But as I've explained numerous times in the past, I could buy a 1 terabyte hard drive for $25. I can't buy a 14th gen Intel processor for $25. So you're stripping from the operating system parts of the OS that just don't make any difference. For the same price as a 14th gen Intel i5 processor, I could buy a 20 terabyte Seagate hard drive. And at that point, does 5 gigs really matter? So I mean, bang for buck, the operating system's kind of pointless. Now, again, stated before, if you want a small operating system that has security intact, check out Ghost Windows 10 20H2. If you want Windows 11 that has the same problems Windows 11 has, but as a bonus has a better UI, more feature, comfort, configuration, standards that look more like Windows 10 or Windows 7, check out the X-Lite version of Windows 11. It's exactly as flawed from a security perspective as Windows 11 is out of the box. So you don't lose anything from the configuration on the Windows 11 side. The Windows 11 system, in my opinion, just makes a lot more sense than the Windows 10 system because you can run the Windows 10 vanilla version on whatever hardware that exists currently. Obviously, with some limitations, like if you get down into the Pentium class, it's probably not going to work very well. But then again, if you're on a Pentium class processor, chances are you don't care about security. So I don't know if this video would be helpful for you at all anyway. At any rate, I really do appreciate you guys sticking around and enjoying the ride with me on this one, and hopefully we'll have many more to come. All right, guys, take care.